Welcome to A Year of War and Peace. I'm your host, Brian E. Denton. A Year of War and Peace is a daily, year-long, chapter-by-chapter reading of and meditation on Leo Tolstoy's epic novel, War and Peace. In these videos and podcasts, you'll be treated to a free reading of one chapter per day of the novel, plus a reflective essay I've written individually tailored to that day's chapter. These readings are offered for free, though if you'd like to support me, you can do so in one of three ways. First, you could purchase my ebook, A Year of War and Peace. It features the entire novel, plus all of my reflective essays, and it's only $2.99 on Amazon.com. You could also become a patron at patreon.com/Brian E. Denton. If you sign up there, you'll receive a sonnet once a month, plus a link to an ebook of my collected sonnets. Finally, if you like, you can make a one-time donation to my PayPal account. The email there is brianedenton@gmail.com. You can also use that email to contact me. I'd be happy to hear from you. Your support is greatly appreciated. Today's reading is from chapter 297. Chapter 297. The so-called partisan war began with the entry of the French into Smolensk. Before partisan warfare had been officially recognized by the government, thousands of enemy stragglers, marauders, and foragers had been destroyed by the Cossacks and the peasants, who killed them off as instinctively as dogs worry a stray mad dog to death. Denis Davidov, with his Russian instinct, was the first to recognize the value of this terrible cudgel, which, regardless of the rules of military science, destroyed the French, and to him belongs the credit for taking the first step towards regularizing this method of warfare. On August 24th, Davidov's first partisan detachment was formed, and then others were recognized. The further the campaign progressed, the more numerous these detachments became. The irregulars destroyed the great army piecemeal. They gathered the fallen leaves that dropped of themselves from that withered tree, the French army, and sometimes shook that tree itself. By October, when the French were fleeing towards Smolensk, there were hundreds of such companies, of various sizes and characters. There were some that adopted all the army methods and had infantry, artillery, staffs, and the comforts of life. Others consisted solely of Cossack cavalry. There were also small scratch groups of foot and horse, and groups of peasants and landowners that remained unknown. A sacristan commanded one party which captured several hundred prisoners in the course of a month. And there was Vasilisa, the wife of a village elder, who slew hundreds of the French. The partisan warfare flamed up most fiercely in the latter days of October. Its first period had passed, when the partisans themselves, amazed at their own boldness, feared every minute to be surrounded and captured by the French. And they hid in the forest without unsaddling, hardly daring to dismount, and always expecting to be pursued. By the end of October, this kind of warfare had taken definite shape. It had become clear to all what could be ventured against the French and what could not. Now only the commanders of detachments with staffs and moving according to rules at a distance from the French still regarded many things as impossible. The small bands that had started their activities long before and had already observed the French closely considered things possible which the commanders of the big detachments did not dare to contemplate. The Cossacks and peasants who crept in among the French now considered everything possible. On October 22nd, Denisov, who was one of the irregulars, was with his group at the height of the guerrilla enthusiasm. Since early morning, he and his party had been on the move. All day long, he had been watching from the forest that skirted the high road a large French convoy of cavalry baggage and Russian prisoners separated from the rest of the army, which, as was learned from spies and prisoners, was moving under a strong escort to Smolensk. Besides Denisov and Dolokhov, who also led a small party and moved in Denisov's vicinity, the commanders of some large divisions with staffs also knew of this convoy and, as Denisov expressed it, were sharpening their teeth for it. Two of the commanders of large parties, one a Pole and the other a German, sent invitations to Denisov almost simultaneously, requesting him to join up with their divisions to attack the convoy. "No, brother, I have grown mustaches myself," said Denisov on reading these documents, and he wrote to the German that, despite his heartfelt desire to serve under so valiant and renowned a general, he had to forego that pleasure, because he was already under the command of the Polish general. To the Polish general, he replied to the same effect, informing him that he was already under the command of the German. Having arranged matters thus, Denisov and Dolokhov intended, without reporting matters to the higher command, to attack and seize that convoy with their own small forces. On October 22nd, it was moving from the village of Mykolino to that of Shamshevo. To the left of the road between Mykolino and Shamshevo, there were large forests, extending in some places up the road itself, though in others a mile or more back from it. Through these forests, Denisov and his party rode all day, sometimes keeping well back in them, and sometimes coming to the very edge, but never losing sight of the moving French. That morning, Cossacks of Denisov's party had seized and carried into the forest 2 wagons loaded with cavalry saddles, which had stuck in the mud not far from Mykolino, where the forest ran close to the road. Since then, and until evening, the party had watched the movements of the French without attacking. It was necessary to let the French reach Shamshevo quietly, without alarming them, and then, after joining Dolokhov, who was to come that evening to a consultation at a watchman's hut in the forest less than half a mile from Shamshevo, to surprise the French at dawn, falling like an avalanche on their heads from 2 sides, and rout and capture them all at one blow. In the rear, more than a mile from Mykolino, where the forest came right up to the road, 6 Cossacks were posted to report if any fresh columns of French should show themselves. Beyond Shamshevo, Dolokhov was to observe the road in the same way, to find out at what distance there were other French troops. They reckoned that the convoy had 1,500 men. Denisov had 200, and Dolokhov might have had as many more, but the disparity of numbers did not deter Denisov. All that he now wanted to know was what troops these were, and to learn that he had to capture a tongue, that is, a man from the enemy column. That morning's attack on the wagons had been made so hastily that the Frenchmen with the wagons had all been killed. Only a little drummer boy had been taken alive, and as he was a straggler, he could not tell them nothing definite about the troops in that column. Denisov considered it dangerous to make a second attack for fear of putting the whole column on the alert, so he sent Tikhon Shcherbati, a peasant of his party, to Shamshevo to try and seize at least one of the French quartermasters who had been sent on in advance. That concludes my reading of chapter 297 of War and Peace. I will now proceed to my reflection on the same. A Year of War and Peace, Day 297. Transformation and Opinion. Pity the poor soldiers of the Grand Army. How great they must have thought themselves in the first decade of the 19th century. Probably they had to be given their name. And it certainly didn't hurt that their martial service in those years came to grip all of Europe in a tight Gallic fist. The world belonged to them. Then 1812 happened. That's when the tides turned. That's when they met with Denisov, Dolokhov, and the great, though small, Russian detachments waging partisan warfare against them throughout the retreat into Smolensk. How humiliating the defeats they suffered at the hands of these small bands must have felt. How could it be that so great an institution as the Grand Army should be so thoroughly and rapidly diminished by such a lowly bunch? Daily Meditation. Constantly bear in mind how many of these changes thou hast already witnessed. The universe is transformation. Life is opinion. Marcus Aurelius, Meditations. All right, so that concludes my reading of and reflection on chapter 297 of War and Peace. I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks so much for listening. Remember that if you'd like to support me, you can do so either by purchasing the ebook A Year of War and Peace, becoming a patron at patreon.com, or making a one-time donation at PayPal. Aside from that, if you want to, there'll be links below also to my Amazon wishlist for books and movies. If you want to support me by purchasing me one or multiple items from those lists, that would be greatly appreciated. I love books and movies. And if you do that, we'll set up a Zoom call or something to discuss the book or movie. At any rate, your support is greatly appreciated. Tomorrow we are going to be reading and reflecting on chapter 298 of War and Peace. I hope you'll join me. Until then, take care of yourselves and others.